Okay, I think we can get started now. Greetings from Parasol Publications. I'm Darren Weir, a writer, editor, and administrative team member here at Parasol. Our writers work hard to present our readers a great selection of stories. Currently, we have a dozen editors on our team, and with 6 publications, we are working every day. We read each submission we receive closely and work with our writers to help them present their best work. Because Deb Harmon and Christine Schoenwald, who are with us this morning, belong to the Boost Nomination Pilot Program, 40 essays from our publications are nominated for broader circulation every month. Vidya Suri is with us too. Vidya handles adding writers to our publications. Okay. We're glad you're with us. Thank you to Medium and all the staff for providing us an amazing platform. To help celebrate, we'll be keeping a tally of our guests in this segment, and you'll be entered for a gift. We'll let you know if you've won in the next few days. Earlier this week, our editors tallied the number of stories they published on Medium. Our staff has published more than 4,500 essays. Our editors include Kit Dejac, Connie Walkup-Hall, Mike Butler, Erie Aston, Ellen Eastwood, Kim Kelly Stamp, Chevy Hansler, Lucinda Monroe Cook, and us. Now I'll introduce our leader and publisher, Deb Harmon. Entrepreneurial by nature, Deb was an advertising and marketing manager for Canby Publications in Cambodia for 5 years before returning to the USA to do a master's degree. Deb retired from teaching English at a secondary level and published a memoir, Love and Loss in Cambodia. She's written more than 450 stories on the Medium platform and has bylines with several literary magazines as well. Publications under the Parasol umbrella include The Narrative Arc, The Wind Phone, In for a Penny, Seen on Screen, Beyond the Scoreboard, and Walking Camino. Today, Deb will be giving you some useful tips on how to improve your writing of memoirs and personal essays to make your stories pop. We will be taking your questions when we open up the Q&A portion a little later, but right now, here's Deb.
Happy Medium Day, and thanks to all of you here with us. In 2017, I got a phone call at my teaching job. I was on prep, so there weren't teenagers in the classroom, fortunately. "Can you come home?" said my husband. "I've had an accident and I need help." I was on a ladder cutting a branch with a chainsaw. I fell. Within a minute, I'd figured out he'd broken his collarbone, or possibly his neck. As a substitute teacher, I was able to leave, so I was home within a few minutes. Driving in, I saw a chainsaw on the gravel driveway and a large branch. A ladder was sideways and my heart raced. In my mind's eye, I could immediately see what had happened, how he had landed hard, how he had stumbled to the house to call me. Was he even still alive? I threw the car in park and ran to the house. Within 30 minutes, my husband was in a gurney on his way to the hospital. As I sat by his hospital bed in the trauma unit, I wrote a note in the writers group I belonged to. "My husband's broken his neck in several places," I said. "I won't be around for a while. Looks like I'll have time to work on my memoir." To my amazement, I got a reply from a famous author and memoirist whose name I won't mention today. "I don't often do this," she said, "but send me the first 30 pages or so of your memoir, and do take care of that husband of yours." After I sent her my first chapter, my heart beating wildly considering this famous writer in New York reading my words, I received the first tip I'll give you for your memoir. Number 1, start with a bang. Especially on Medium, the first 3 sentences of your story will make or break you. Grab your reader fast. In media res is a Latin term that means in the middle of action. Begin with an intense anecdote or the car chase or getting pulled over by the cops when you've got a body in the trunk. Cut the boring background. We don't want to hear your life in chronological order. You can add a bit of that in later. Begin with action. Here's the second tip. Use elements of fiction and creative writing in your personal essays and memoir. Use all the tricks, imagery, dialogue, figurative language. Let's consider another writer, Kendra Sparkles. Kendra's entered a few of her writing contests excuse me, and she won a prize with her story, The One-Eyed Bird That Never Sang. In this memoir, Kendra works at a group home. Tucked in a dismal, dark corner of the residence is a small, dirty cage with a very sad little bird. In her story of rescuing the bird, Kendra shows through imagery and dialogue how pathetic its existence is. A sad little bird gives deflated squeaks, for example. It's stuck in a dark corner, and the supervisor says they don't even hardly feed it. Here's an excerpt from her story. Kendra's supervisor says this about the bird. That shithead, somebody gifted him to the house 5 years ago, but no one here likes animals. Half the guys are terrified of him. Terrible gift. Look at that shitty eye of his. In this snippet of dialogue, which by the way doesn't have to be 100% accurate, writers, Kendra shows a lot. The total disregard for the poor little bird. Each word oozes negativity. Words like terrified, terrible, shitty-eyed. We, the readers, are pulled in, and by the end of the story, we're cheering for this bird, but also for Kendra because we trust her storytelling. We recognize people like that cruel supervisor, and believe me, Kendra saves the day. Her storytelling is great. Images, dialogue, and tension. It's all there. I recommend you read her story. And that brings us to the third tip. Be courageous. Don't be afraid of people judging you. Of course they will. So what? Will they talk about you? So what? Will they think you're a pariah? So what? If they don't know who you really are, there isn't much depth to the relationship anyway. When I was writing my memoir, Love and Loss in Cambodia, I realized I needed to add a detail about my life that was so personal, I thought I would die if it went into print. After mulling it over, I wrote it into the book. I wrote as honestly and artfully as I could. I reminded myself that if I hated it, I would remove it later. It was crucial to my book. I decided because it was such a huge event in my life. After I published my book, I had scores of phone calls and emails from others who said they were glad I had been honest. Here's a tip to help you write. Simply write your truth. Writing it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to publish it, but what if you did? Remember, those who mind don't matter. Those who matter don't mind. That's probably Dr. Seuss. Here's another example. The Kiss That Changed My Life. Narrative arc essayist Chaotically Lottie writes about a crush on her friend Bree when they're both young teenagers. They're hanging out, as kids do, and play a word association game. I'll read an excerpt. I started us off using the first book I saw in the bags at our feet as the prompt. Math, match, fire, truck, red, heart, you. Wait, me? You heard heart and immediately went to me? Bree's face told me she wasn't simply stalling. She was genuinely touched and surprised at my response. Well, yeah, I thought love and you at the same time. Maybe I should have said love. Blushing furiously as I awkwardly stumbled over my words. I was the type of person who felt deeply, but privately. The unexpected vulnerability set me off on a tangent of trying to downplay my words without taking them back. In writing about her love for this young girlfriend, Lottie accomplishes 2 acts of bravery and vulnerability. First, she recounts the vulnerability and shyness she felt as a young woman falling in love with another girl. She stammered and she was anxious and she came right out with it. Second, do you think it's easy for people to come out in stories? No, it's not. But is it important? Absolutely. First, we should all be able to affirm who we are as individuals, to have a choice and a voice. but it takes courage. And that's why we love Chaotically Lottie. She's unapologetically herself, and we love her for it. Writing honestly about your life takes courage, especially with issues you feel vulnerable about. A physical disability, a death in the family, losing a job, having a personal crisis like divorce. These aspects of life are important to share, and those who write personal essays and memoirs know there's an audience out there going through similar issues. That's why we love this writing. You don't have to be a strong, perfect hero in your essays. Show your Achilles heel. Admit to being an imperfect human being, and we'll like you better. That's authentic, vulnerable, courageous writing from the heart. Writing you won't get from AI, by the way. Let's talk briefly about memoir, which is a fancy French word for memory. Memoir focuses not on your perfect memory of a past event. Rather, it focuses on your interactions, feelings, thoughts, and learnings from your memories. Memory is a strange beast. I was a teenager in the 70s, and my sister was a year and a half older. Believe me, she remembers most of my family's escapades in a different way than I do. One time, Mom threw a wine glass hitting the wall to the right of Dad's head while we were having dinner. The glass broke and the Chablis dripped down the wall. We kids, I had a brother too, stared, looking back and forth at our parents. We'd seen a similar scene on the 70s TV show. Was it The Love Boat? Was it Get Smart? I don't remember, but I do remember we'd seen it done on some TV show. It was better on TV. Anyway, my sister remembers things about our growing up years in a completely different way than me. If I were to ask her what she remembered about that incident, she would recall what happened, but the circumstances, why Mom threw the wine glass, she would explain things completely differently. That's because her lens is different. Her personality is different. And believe me, her relationship with her parents was different. The interesting aspect of personal essays and memoir is reading of other people's impressions and memories of events, especially if you share history. Get ready to hear a truckload of, I don't remember that, and that's not exactly how that happened. And that's okay. The correct response is to smile and say, well, we experience things differently, don't we? It's called point of view, and everybody has one. I'd like to make a distinction between memoir and personal essays. A personal essay explores a topic that's near and dear to you and perhaps unique to you. Maybe you're a proud introvert and love bird watching. Why not marry the fabulous silence of watching nature without having to listen to your friends yammer about something? If you're quiet, the birds will come. That's one idea for a personal essay. Connie Waka-Pull recently wrote a personal essay about the joy of solitude, and she shares this. What some call being alone, I call sanctuary. I seek it. I've always sought it. I don't think that's going to change. Mike, we've published many personal essays at the Narrative Art. Mike Butler's essay about learning he's going to become a grandfather. Kit DeJacques's personal essay about affirmative action. Erie Aston's personal essay about her version of a long walk. Kim Kelly Stamp's essay about embracing her true identity. Lucinda Monroe Cook's essay about riding bicycles through Canada. Chevy Hansler wonders why everyone in the family keeps writing her to write all the obituaries. And who could possibly forget Ellen Eastwood's stunning essay, please remove your laptop from the coffee shop? These are all brilliant personal essays. Memoir as a genre is different. Memoir is a form in which the writer chooses a specific time in his or her life or a theme that seems to recur and explores it thoroughly in a narrative, a story or a book with a narrative arc. The important part of memoir is that the writer explores her learning and feelings through the events of the story. Memoir is second guessing and explaining and thinking made explicit. It's the work of your brain now, sorting out a memory of an event so compelling, joyful, or upsetting that you're still trying to make sense of it. It's metacognition, considering how you dealt with an event and perhaps even having an epiphany as you write. Do you remember that old phrase from school, show your work? In Memoir, you show your thinking. You show how you've come to terms with part of your life. I have a friend who says he loves it when people wait a long time after an event to write a memoir. Well, that's basically a given. Remember, memoir is based on a memory, and it should be something from long in the past. The learning and the emotions will be the important part. You'll have sifted and mined the gold out. Only then will you have the material for your memoir. On the narrative art, I'll be posting, along with this transcript, examples of memoir and personal essays so you can compare the two. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll hand things back to Darren.
Okay, Deb, we're ready now to start taking your questions. Just click on Ask a Question. It's on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. We'll be screening those in just a minute, but I've got one to get us started. So what is the difference between writing humor stories and those that are more hard-hitting and emotional? Christine, let's go to you.
I don't think that there is much of a difference, actually. I think you use the same amount of truth and detail that you would in either. I think it's also good to put some humor in a serious one. It helps to relieve the tension. When you're writing something that's very serious, very hard hitting, the reader feels the tension and it can get very intense. So if you put in a little humor, that allows a release and gives the reader a moment to sigh and go on so that they don't explode with tension.
Okay. Deb, Vidya, did you want to add anything?
I think she said it all. It's basically about feeling every word the writer writes.
Okay, let's go to another question then. How do you know how exposed a story should be? I don't want to hurt my family. Deb?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because that's long been a concern of mine. And in fact, I've really flocked to the big names like Mary Karr and read her The Art of Memoir in order to try to figure out what in the heck do I do so that I avoid hurting my family. I write about my family and I write about my exes, as you know. Kind of an odd comment. It becomes a lot easier to write about someone if they've passed on. This was the case when I wrote my memoir, Love and Loss in Cambodia. I've got it right here, as a matter of fact. Hey! I actually wrote my memoir after my ex-husband had died in a tragic accident. He drowned in a tributary of the Mekong River in Cambodia. And I initially began writing because I needed to kind of process that out. I also do write about my family, and many of them are very much alive and kicking. I found that it works absolutely best to change the relationship slightly. If you're writing about a sibling, make it a cousin. If you're writing about somebody who's got blonde hair and blue eyes, make it about somebody who's got dark hair. And also, I absolutely recommend changing the names. I think it was Mary Karr who suggested that she lets people actually choose the name that she'll be calling them in memoirs that she writes. I don't approach the people that I'm writing about and ask them to, choose a name and a character, because typically I'm writing about some really fraught relationship. I find that my best memoirs, and the ones that are read the most, aren't about the easy, pleasant relationships. It's about the conflicts and the arguments and the strange things and the person that stole my purse when I was 18. So I bet you somebody else is going to have something more to say to this, but I definitely change names and descriptions.
Did anybody else want to weigh in?
Just that when you're writing a personal essay or a memoir, you're not writing a newspaper article. No one is going to fact check you. We also recommend that you not say, this is not their real name, because that just is unprofessional, and we're assuming it's not their real name.
Right. Okay, here's one from Anonymous. What guidance can you give for including other people's stories in your memoir? For example, someone close to you who came out as gay and it changed the trajectory of my life. Anybody? Deb?
I'll respond to that one. We had an amazing memoirist from Laos. I want to say, was it Mei Yang? Am I remembering your name correctly? Really wonderful secondary teacher who wrote about a nephew who came to her and said, Auntie, I'm in love and I'm getting married, and it's a he. And her entire memoir was about how she talked with him and supported him and talked through it. And she went to the family with him because Laotian families are quite traditional, as many families are everywhere. And it was an amazing, amazing essay of great courage and great strength. One of the things that you have to do if you're writing about an event like coming out that involves somebody else but not you, you really need to focus on your handling of it, your processing it, your thinking about it, epiphanies that you have. You cannot tell another person's story. You have to be very, very careful about that. So anytime that you're writing about an event that's been hugely traumatic to another person, it has to include elements of how it affected you and how you process that mentally. On the narrative arc this morning, if you kind of come down through the stories, there was a writer who just wrote a fabulous story. I'm so sorry, I don't remember your name, but it's about how my father's burns affected our family, or the legends of my father's burns. And when her father, who was a twin, was a child, he accidentally pulled a kettle of water off of a stove, and it landed all over his chest and burnt him horribly. And her father, of course, was incredibly scarred. In the memoir that this writer worked through, she explained how her father became a legend, and he would appear in public without a shirt on, and her boyfriend said, "Wow, what happened to your dad?" And the father was so courageous. He'd been through World War II, stayed over there with a buddy until they could both get out together. I suggest you look at it. That's a great example of how somebody else's story can be processed through your memoir.
Okay, did anybody else want to add to that at all? Something that's similar to that, Jen is asking, do you need permission if your story includes a public figure?
Like the orange one?
Sure. Well, I guess you couldn't get very much permission from that, so.
Yeah.
I don't think you do. Just, I'll quickly answer it. No, you don't. You see that people's names are mentioned on the media all the time and somebody's telling their story. So another one, how important is, this is from Chuck Miller, how important is providing an explicit takeaway? Can the story stand on its own, allowing people to take what they will from it? Christine?
Well, I think that there needs to be some sort of universal theme underneath it that everyone can relate to. Like with Deb's, we all understand loss and grief. And while her story is specific to her, we can all relate to it. So, yeah, I do think there should be something that, at least if you want it widely read. Deb may disagree.
Deb, do you disagree?
I got so sidetracked by looking at the comments. I'd like to mention that I just saw a question from Jenna Zark. She's the lady that wrote the article about her father's burns. Can you rephrase that question for me, please?
Do you think that there should be a universal lesson? Yeah.
I think that's a good question. And when I first came on platform, really to write, really to focus and write a lot and try to make a little bit of money from it. Back at the time, people were writing little takeaways in pull quote format at the bottom of their essays. I no longer feel that that's important. And I think that often towards the conclusion of your essay, you should try to find a way to wrap it in some way. It does not have to be a happy ending, but I think that there's an artful way of concluding, not too contrived, not formulaic, but there's a final takeaway. There's got to be an ending. Conclusions are hard. I don't think that it has to be a lesson explicitly stated at the end. And in fact, I've told some of my best essayists, you don't need to wrap it up with a didactic, educational commentary at the end. Just let your conclusion stand.
But it does have to have that narrative arc with
it does have to have
an ending.
We want a beginning, a middle, and an end. Absolutely.
Okay, here's something from Carolyn. We'll have to do this one fairly quickly, but Carolyn, she says, my memoir, Boundless, let's give it a plug, will be published in early 2024. What is a good strategy for writing short, medium posts that spring from that? Deb, you can probably answer this because you've done that yourself.
Well, I think that it's a good idea to first build your audience. It's absolutely crucial to do a ton of writing on the platform so that people know you and trust you before you start posting memoir excerpts. I have on occasion posted a few excerpts of my memoir, but I've actually found it to be more helpful if you post stories that are independent of it and then link to your story at the conclusion, or find some way to include information about your memoir in your little biographical snippet. And people will, if they love your writing, they will buy your memoir. I've sold so many books since I've been on platform.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for questions right now. But before we go, we do want to announce the winners of our Summer Love Writing Competition. I'll send it over to Christine and Vidya now to tell us about that.
Yes, every few months we have a themed competition with cash prizes. The first prize is $50, second is $30, and third is $20. Plus, we have honorable mentions.
Thank you, Christine. I'm so thrilled to announce our honorable mentions. In fact, we had so many writers, including our editorial team, who writes very interesting essays. All of the writing on the narrative arc is true, so that makes our love stories especially diverse. While every story could have placed, we finally had to choose winners. We always have to do that. As a team, we all choose our favorites, obviously, and many overlapped. Exciting. Therefore, rather than 3 honorable mentions, we have chosen 5. Our honorable mentions are as follows. Lee Bench with his story, Can You Fall in Love Without Saying I Love You? And Nathan Chen, The Love That Lingers Long After Goodbye. Then Anne Forbes Cooper with her story, How a Devastating Love Affair Made Me Leave the Country. Then Doro Volkova with her story, Love in the Georgian Sun. Jojo Tekina, Her Blind Date with Destiny.
Drum roll, please. Here are our prize winners. Starting with third place, we have Arpad Negi with his story, Girl with the Summer Name. Second place winner is Elizabeth Dauber with her story, The 4 Seasons of Love. And lastly, our first place winner is Chaotically Lottie with her story, It's Always Been You. In the next few days, we'll publish this transcript with details about our winning stories. The top 3 winners will be receiving their cash awards within the week, and our publisher, Deb, will be in touch soon. Congratulations.
Congratulations, everyone. We'd like to thank all of the writers here with us at Parasol Publications, and of course to all of you who read and support the writers and their stories. Happy Medium Day, everybody.
Happy Medium Day. Keep writing.
Happy Medium Day.
Happy Medium
Have
Day.
fun.